The thought of it made him unbelievably excited. Yeah, I am Philip, just watch. I'll be the most important man in the kingdom. Philip worked his brain furiously. He made the biggest gamble of his life to ask Albedo to an upcoming ball. You idiot. This rained on Philip's parade, but at the same time, it fanned his smoldering embers into a blaze. The fuel he'd been stockpiling all his life burst into flames. Philip cast an insulting look on the conspicuously graying man in front of him. I didn't send you so you could do something like that. You utter fool. Philip had told his father what happened at the palace during the party. Now he sighed. There's no way we would be invited to a royal cocktail party. The reason I worked so hard to arrange an invitation was to create a chance to thank the Count and to introduce you. Nobles from various factions gathered at royal cocktail parties. In their faction, a change of lord was a low-priority reason to attend. They didn't press that angle, and Philip must have been approved on somewhat hazy grounds. Once he was approved, it was difficult for anyone to complain afterward. Philip's father didn't have faith in his abilities. He must have thought that if he introduced him to the faction members in the usual way, there would have been trouble. Understanding all that, Philip desperately suppressed his discontent and put on a fake smile. Now, father, please don't get so worked up. I am going to make sure my house— What do you mean my house? What you've done flies in the face of all common sense. Philip snapped internally. He thought, I simply made the first move because all the others were spineless cowards. Do you intend to forever yield to those fools and chickens and content yourself with this miserable standing? Father, I'd like you to please think for a moment. Our domain may be off the main road, but we race still between the capital and the nation of darkness. It's not hard to imagine that if the Rey Esti's kingdom and the nation of darkness went to war, we would be caught up in the chaos of the battle. Therefore, we should make friendly ties with the nation of darkness. You idiot, his father shouted, his face even redder than before. Those wretches in the nation of darkness are the ones who killed your brother. You want to join forces with them? Isn't that treason? What about it? Thought Philip. As long as the nation of darkness was stronger, it wasn't an issue to betray the kingdom. They could be vassals of the nation of darkness. What was wrong with the weaker adhering themselves to the stronger? Who could blame him? What are you thinking? He was disgusted by his father's foolishness. Saying something this obvious was absurd, but apparently it had to be said. That's simple, father. It's to protect me. He had been about to say my. In the near future, it would be his, but it wasn't completely yet. Our domain is to protect our vassals. The nation of darkness is far stronger than the kingdom. Don't you think they might attack in the near future? I want to have connections ready for when that time comes. NGH, what do you mean by connections? What will the neighboring lords think if we do that? In this day and age, no one will blame us. In Philip's domain, many had died in that war. The situation must have been the same for the neighboring domains. That meant that no one had spare energy to get annoyed with them. Is there really nothing else on your mind? Huh? Philip asked, unable to determine the motive of his father's question. You thinking too shallowly convinced you've accomplished something by having a daydream. That's enough. The man who had been standing silently behind his father up until then spoke. It was the butler who had served his father for many years. He was the stony-faced type, and Philip hated him. He was one of the people his father would get rid of once his rule over the domain was secure. At the butler's comment, Philip's father worked to steady his breath. The red in his face drained away. His complexion went back to its usual unhealthy look. I need to ask you, he panted. Philip, are you sure it won't antagonize nearby lords? That would be even worse. I don't think so. His father's shoulders slumped. That attitude irritated and anxious him. Am I forgetting something? But he couldn't think of anything. Many young people died on the Katsi plain. All sorts of problems will crop up in the next few years, so we need to forge cooperative relations with neighboring nobles now. We'll have to have one domain growing food. Another will weave cloth. None of us has enough land to produce everything ourselves. Neither do we have money to spare. Now who would want to cooperate with a house that had dealings with the nation of darkness? The thoughts that came to Philip as he listened created a slick of sweat down his back. His father was right, and don't you that our domain doesn't produce anything special that the other domains absolutely need, so even if we were left out of any cooperative alliance, it would be no skin off their backs. Philip frantically worked his brain. I am smart. I can refute anything this old fool says. That's exactly why we should go with the nation of darkness. His father gestured for him to continue. If we align with them, we can get them to support us. Then let me ask you this. If you were someone from the nation of darkness, no, say you were the king of some country, and a village from an enemy nation asked you to send them food, would you? Of course, I would definitely send it. Why, isn't it obvious? It proves that I am a benevolent lord. And besides that, nothing else in particular, I guess. His father had his mouth slightly ajar. Was he impressed? But the reaction was a little strange if that was the case. He did think that even the nation of darkness would want to be known as a benevolent nation, especially since it was ruling the former Rey Estes kingdom area of Rantel. He was sure the nation would want to put on a friendly face for them. I see. Is that what you think? I would probably support them too. I would want something to attack that country over. I would wage a war to liberate the village suffering under kingdom rule. Ridiculous. That would just be letting your imagination get the better of you. Besides, that reasoning won't fly anyhow. Oh, you don't think so? In the first place, if what you said was true, wouldn't that be even more reason to strengthen our ties with the nation of darkness? You, his father, looked frustrated. Have you no pride as a noble of the kingdom? Sure I do, but not having that pride would still be better than being destroyed. This is the king who savaged your brother and many other kingdom subjects with that horrifying magic spell. The king those things reverently hold aloft its war, father. Does it really matter if you die by the sword or by magic? Why do you have so much faith in the king of darkness? It wasn't as if he had faith in him. It was true he felt an affinity. But more importantly, the king was a pawn. They could use him to create value. He could also use him to enrich his own position. A pawn, that's right. To him, this king, who everyone in the kingdom fears, is a mere pawn. He envisioned himself playing a huge nation-scale board game. He grew excited. Still, Father's concerns are valid, but not terribly serious, considering how simply he refuted them. Still, perhaps he should tell Lady Albedo next time he sees her. You have nothing left to say. Did you thank the Count at the party for recognizing you as the next lord of the domain? This was the thing that made the least sense to Philip. Why should he have to bow his head to someone he'd never met just because the guy was the head of the faction? Choosing the next lord of the domain was within the realm of each domain's autonomy. The Count had nothing to do with it. If the man had recommended him over his two brothers to inherit the domain, he would of course have thanked him, but that wasn't how it had happened. Philip's current position was entirely due to luck. In other words, there was no reason to lower his head. That was why he hadn't paid his respects, but he figured his father would get upset again if he said that. This was a lie to protect his ailing old man. Of course, I see, that's good. Then things might still work out. We should be able to ask him for assistance if necessary. Just as Philip was feeling relieved, sensing the conversation might be over, the butler chimed in from behind. I still have a question. The first issue you brought up, Master Philip, hasn't been resolved? You said you invited the representative from the Nation of Darkness to the ball we were holding. What are your plans? Right, Philip, what were you thinking? We don't have anywhere to hold a ball. Landholders from the country kept manors in the capital. They used them while visiting the capital, and they were consequently on the small side. Of course, these manors weren't as small as a commoner's hut. The nobles used them only a few times a year. But to demonstrate their power, they needed a place large enough to accommodate the entourage accompanying them from their domain. Still, even though the house was relatively big, it wasn't built for holding balls. But that problem was already solved. It's all right. We can do it here, but I have a place we can borrow. Ooh, is it the Countess? His father smiled faintly as he asked, but Philip shook his head. No, it's the house of an acquaintance I met in the capital. The lady of the house will let us borrow it. I saw her before I came back, and she said it would be no problem. For how much? The butler's question made him sigh inwardly. That was the first thing he asked. For free. Really? Philip remembered what the woman had told him. She thought he had a bright future. She would invest in him if he liked. He could just pay her back double later. That sounds a little too convenient. Are you sure she's not trying to swindle you? That irritated Philip, but he knew how much his father trusted the butler, so he couldn't go flinging insults. I made a debt, but I arranged to pay it back at the same time. It's not a problem. This means you have a venue. But what about the invitations? Are you going to ask the Count to arrange them? What are you talking about? Philip groaned in his head. The whole point is to hold the ball to build up my name. Why should I have to give away the best job after doing all this prep work? Is this how a slave thinks? How sad. He didn't want to end up like that. That's okay. I asked the lady lending me the venue. She will take care of it. Naturally, I'll select the guests. It's rude to not include the count. It's not too late to ask him for help. Do you even know nobles to invite for polite company? To an extent, but I also have a special guest planned. The lady mentioned him to me. Are you suspicion appeared in his father's eyes? Sure you Ray not being manipulated by this woman? Father, that's awfully offensive. I planned this, and I am carrying it out. I am getting some help, but it's because she heard my idea and thought it had merit. She thought it would go well, and that's why she's funding it. Why are you being this way? I am the next head of the domain, so shouldn't you be supporting me 100%? She had said, if you let a few nobles I am close with attend, I'll help you. He asked for her assistance, because she was clearly requesting benefits for herself as well. He wasn't being manipulated at all. She was different from people like the Count his father was bound to, who took all the profit for themselves. Philip wanted to tell his father, you Ray the one being manipulated. Sorry, but could you tell me her name? Philip contained his anger. He was talking to someone who still had a slave mentality. The right thing to do was generously forgive him. Her name is Hilma Shugnius. Have you ever heard of her? No, have you? The butler also shook his head. Philip was satisfied to know of her before his father, who had lived in noble society a long time. I'd like to ask her about involving the Count. There could be trouble if we go to him over her head. Is there anything else, father? His father looked utterly exhausted and did not reply. Philip still had some complaints, but his project was underway. All that was left was to invite Lady Albedo of the Nation of Darkness and come up with a plan to solidify his standing with her. Before Philip's eyes was a splendid ballroom. It was no less grand than the royal ballroom. Maybe it was even grander. He was bursting with the desire to brag to someone. It was true that he had left the decorating up to Hilma. She had said to him, is a standard ballroom good enough, or would you like something unparalleled? If the latter, the debt will be sizable. Philip didn't hesitate to choose the latter. In other words, Philip had put himself in debt to arrange this space. It was due to his efforts, and it was filled with nobles whom he had gathered. It was perfect, which was why only one thing bothered him. He had decided where to send invitations. He borrowed some wisdom when doing so. The invitations were sealed with the crest of his house, and more than anything, everyone had come to meet the representative from the Nation of Darkness. Philip was the one who had invited her. In other words, he was the host and organizer. The attendees should have been thanking him with bowed heads. They should have expressed their gratitude for being invited. They should have praised him for having the courage to invite the representative from the Nation of Darkness. But what actually happened? The first person everyone who showed up went to greet was Hilma. Then they finally came to him. It only happened after she mentioned him. How would things have gone if she hadn't nudged them? He was heavily indebted to her, so he had to tolerate the fact that she stood out more than him. But he was offended by the other nobles. The nobles should have used common sense to know who to greet first. This is why you Ray all so hopeless. He wondered if it was a mistake to take Hilma up on her proposal after all. The nobles he invited were all based on suggestions from Hilma. He selected people who either had become or were about to become domain heads as a result of the battle with the Nation of Darkness. In other words, they were all in the same position as him. He had followed her advice because he thought there would then be many people who could understand how he felt. He thought that a house where the Lord wasn't changing was much more likely to have a negative opinion of the Nation of Darkness, but they were all incompetent. The next guest to arrive went straight to Hilma, right before his eyes. How rude, thought Philip. The idle idiots really were fools. That must be why they didn't know who they were supposed to greet first. He didn't know what else to think. Well, but isn't that a good thing? Isn't the whole reason they were afraid to take the initiative that they were stupid? If another noble was smarter than me, I'd never get to be head of the new faction. Unfortunately, my house isn't powerful yet either. This was another chance. He would count their blunder of not greeting him first as a debt. He would get it paid back sometime in the future when he needed it. As Philip was counting his eggs before they hatched, Hilma came over. She was all skin and bones. She looked sickly, so thin, like she must have been suffering a serious illness. If only she had a little meat on her bones, she would be beautiful, but that was in the past. Lord Philip, it seems like everyone you invited has arrived. Oh, in other words, everyone considered him number 2. Philip thought he was concealing his inferiority complex, but Hilma seemed to notice it anyway. She laughed. You seem dissatisfied. No, not at all. Philip smiled. He was a noble after all. He felt he had a knack for making his opinion felt. Please don't lie like that, sir. As your assistant in this endeavor, I am getting my sips of the sweet nectar too. We mustn't hide things from each other. There was something humble and fawning about her words. Philip's heart fluttered. This was how common people were meant to interact with nobles. He realized he was sitting in the position he had aspired to for so long. He felt the displeasure he had been experiencing fade away. What is it, Lord Philip? No, you right. I wasn't mad, just a little anxious. Anxious how? Is something missing? If so, shall I get it ready before the representative arrives? It's not that. Philip cleared his throat pompously as he answered. The people here just don't seem very high quality. Even if we form a faction with them, I wonder if we'll be able to compete with the other factions. I see, so that's what you worried about. Hilma smiled. She was too skinny to arouse any desire in him, but her charms were still captivating enough that he felt his throat wanting to swallow hard. But isn't that precisely why you should be the one to lead them, Lord Philip? Imagine your domain. Are the people who live there clever? No, isn't that exactly why someone wise needs to be at the top? Yes, I see, you right. I believe that you'll be a good leader for the faction, Lord Philip, and I'll support you as much as I can. To get your sweet nectar, of course, it will be profitable. I am sure of that, hence my offer of assistance. Hilma grinned. Philip's anger had completely vanished. What Hilma was saying was right. He was thankful he was lucky enough to have met her. She had all the things Philip didn't have in the capital: financial power and connections. She was also friendly with him. She made it so easy to understand the benefits involved and told him exactly what compensation he needed to provide, allowing him to feel comfortable working with her. If you stick with me, I'll make you the wealthiest woman in existence. It seemed like her eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled in satisfaction. That makes me so happy. I've been thinking I'd like a necklace with a big jewel like the noble women wear. Work hard, Lord Philip. Yes, leave it to me. By the way, there's something I wanted to ask you. All right, go ahead. What is it? Why are you so thin? Is something wrong with you? He needed her cooperation going forward, or the plan wouldn't work. If her sickness couldn't be cured by a priest, he would have to find a replacement for her quickly, or maybe she could recommend someone to succeed her. No, there's nothing wrong. I've heard daughters of large families go on diets to lose weight. Is that it? Hilma smiled. It was a smile he'd never seen before, and it made him indescribably anxious. No, I just can't eat solid food. That means I can only have liquids and not too much. So that's why. If I do get sick, I'll have to get some treatment. Please don't worry about that. The atmosphere reverted abruptly to the way it had been a moment ago. I won't die without sucking up lots of sweet nectar from you. Oh, okay, I see. That's fine then. But you can eat solid food? How come? He didn't mean anything particular by the question, but the results were major. It was like all the emotion drained out of Hilma's face. Philip panicked at the change, which was even more dramatic than the previous one. What's wrong? Oh, do excuse me. I was just remembering. She held a hand over her mouth as she said it. She looked awfully pale. Oh, I am sorry. I must have brought up bad memories. What sort of trauma did she have to go through to end up incapable of eating solid foods? Now it seemed she was living a luxurious lifestyle, but perhaps there had been a period of her life where she was eating poorly. He wanted to ask, but it was clear he couldn't. Lord Philip, it's time to welcome the representative. If you escort her in, everyone's eyes will be on you. That will convey more clearly than words who the most powerful person here is. Ooh, you right. At the royal cocktail party, she had appeared solo, so he figured that was normal, but apparently that wasn't the case. He was embarrassed to not have known, so he pretended it had slipped his mind until now. I am sure everyone will be surprised. A bunch of people who failed to greet him would get anxious and panic. Philip felt a sadistic pleasure. There were nobles gathered here. They had greater titles and more land than he did. What would the look on their faces be as they stood before him, the unnecessary burden of a child in the family? Right. I shouldn't keep her waiting. Let us call her. Then I'll lead you partway there. Hilma called a waiter. The waiter took Philip to the room where the representative of the Nation of Darkness, Lady Albedo, was waiting. He knocked and then opened the door. The woman inside was simply too gorgeous. She wore a raven black dress. It was different from any he had ever seen in the kingdom. Her bare shoulders were a radiant white. Around her neck was a string of large jewels. It wasn't gaudy at all. It was a modest accompaniment to her beauty. She is so pretty he blushed in spite of himself. Shall we go? Yes, allow me to escort you. He took her hand. It was covered in a black lace glove. He helped her to her feet. Standing next to her, he noticed a pleasant smell. What perfume made his heart so light? He suddenly felt an urge to smell more of it, even if it meant snorting, but he couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. They walked together to the ballroom, but the silence weighed heavily on Philip. He racked his brain to find a good topic. He thought of something just as they reached the ballroom's door. The ballroom is full of nobles. They are all here to meet you, Lady Albedo. Oh. I am grateful for your support, Lord Philip, she replied right away. Albedo gave him a familiar smile. Philip's heart pounded. Did she maybe sort of like him? In just a little while he would be the man leading a large faction. The Nation of Darkness may have had an overpowering military, but it still had only one city, so wasn't he a fairly good catch? And he wasn't married either. By the way, Lady Albedo, do you have a husband? Her eyes went wide.